So a desperate Separatist offensive launched to regain the gains of another failed desperate Separatist offensive, all launched by leadership of a faction that's very clearly on its deathbed. Today let's talk about the circumstances that led to the Battle of Kaller, one of the last battles of the Clone Wars. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So, we just finished talking about the Battle of Utapau, and many people sort of leave the Battle of Utapau in their minds as the last battle of the Clone Wars, but in reality, there are other battles that began after Republic forces began their assault on Utapau, and we're going to talk about one of those battles today. We're going to discuss the Battle of Kaller. Now, the Battle of Kaller is a much larger ordeal. It's actually two battles, but we're focusing primarily on the second one in battle analysis. So today I want to talk a little bit about the first battle, which was much quicker, briefer, and really isn't covered quite as well as the second. So, before we jump into this, let's talk about why Kaller is significant and why it became a battlefield. Now, the planet Kaller is not actually in a strategically significant spot or rich in resources, but simply in the crosshairs of both factions because of its location, sort of, and the fact that both sides were getting desperate. In the waning weeks of the CIS, Count Dooku, and yes, he's still alive when this order was given, ordered Separatist forces to attempt to seize the planet of Kaller, which they did successfully with very little resistance. This led to a brief occupation. Now, seeing that as the case, the Republic opted to carry out a counterstrike with the intention of liberating Kaller. So the 41st Elite Corps, led by Jedi General Bepa Balaba, was pulled from the Third Battle of Magito and dispatched to Kaller. There they carried out a counter-invasion, which ultimately very quickly drove Separatist forces off of the planet, in an event known as the Liberation of Kaller. Republic forces were able to sweep in and quickly push Separatist forces out of the region, with the leadership of Separatist invasion forces on Kaller vowing to return before fleeing the planet with most of his forces, leaving only a few droid units behind to keep causing chaos for the 41st Elite Corps that were now occupying the planet. While all of this was going on, Separatist forces carried out their assault on Coruscant, and Count Dooku was killed. In the chaos immediately following the Battle of Coruscant, orders went out that were kind of sporadic, mostly from General Grievous, who was trying his best to lead the droid armies as efficiently as he could, who basically ordered any Separatist forces that were in a position to carry out an attack to do so, to try to sow chaos in the Republic in one last-ditch effort to at least leave a mark on the galaxy. During all of this, Separatist forces were rallying on Utapau and preparing for one final stand there. The remaining forces of the units that had retreated from Kaller prepared to launch their counteroffensive. What followed was a Separatist siege of Kaller that was relatively brief, but relatively violent, and saw clone forces and Separatist forces facing off in the more rural regions of the planet, while the Republic troops held firm in the cities and the capital. And that second battle there, the Battle of Kaller, is what we see at the start of the Bad Batch. By the time Separatist forces had arrived on Kaller and began their assault, the Republic forces had already engaged General Grievous on Utapau, and word was starting to dissipate with Republic intelligence that Grievous was in combat with Kenobi and that the war would soon be over. This is actually expressed by Tech during the events of the Battle of Kaller. But ultimately, the interesting thing about all of this is that the planet Kaller doesn't have a very strong specific strategic significance like Kashyyyk, for example, which had multiple factors that led it to be valuable for both factions. Kaller was more or less inconsequential. It wasn't a linchpin world, and while it did sit at the nexus of two relatively small hyperspace lanes, that wasn't enough to justify massive, military action to seize the planet. It was simply circumstance. The Separatists needed some sort of a win, and they saw Kaller as an easy target, and it resulted in a battle that was ultimately fought over nothing. It would result in Kaller's occupation by the Separatists and later the Empire, but that's a topic for another day. All in all, the Battle of Kaller is one of the last battles of the Clone Wars, and the only reason it happened is because desperate and confused Separatist forces following the Battle of Coruscant were dispatching orders willy-nilly. That's likely because the people in charge, most notably General Grievous, didn't have the necessary political or strategic command experience to lead the Separatist faction. In fact, the way Grievous took power is a little bit questionable, and I know I've plugged this video a lot, but if you want to learn about how Grievous took power and the circumstances in which General Grievous sort of assumed the mantle following Dooku's death, I'll leave a link up here to my video on how Grievous took over the CIS, and discuss whether or not that was a coup. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Separatists throwing resources around like this. After all, their faction is basically on its deathbed. They're losing battles to the Republic all across the galaxy. Their leadership are scattered and or dead. And here they are throwing a massive military force at a planet that is inconsequential. Do you think this makes any sense, or is it just the inevitable result of a faction that's falling apart at the seams? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.